May 16, 2010. The man who gave heavy metal its most iconic symbol, the devil horns, took his final bow. But Ronnie James Dio's death wasn't just the end of a legend. It was the conclusion of the most epic battle of his career. And this time, he couldn't win. This is what really happened to the metal god himself. Ronald James Patavona wasn't supposed to become a metal legend. Born in 1942 to Italian immigrant parents, he was destined to become a pharmacist, like his father wanted. But Ronnie had a voice that would change heavy metal forever, and a determination that wouldn't quit. He started with doo-wop groups in the 1950s, slowly working his way through the rock underground. But it wasn't until Ritchie Blackmore discovered his band Elf in the early 1970s that everything changed. When Blackmore left Deep Purple to form Rainbow in 1975, he recruited Ronnie as his vocalist, and Ronald Patavona became Ronnie James Dio. Rainbow was Dio's graduate school in heavy metal. Songs like Man on the Silver Mountain and Stargazer established him as metal's premier storyteller, weaving tales of magic and dragons that transported fans to another world. But Blackmore was a control freak, and after 3 albums, Dio was ready for something bigger. In 1979, Black Sabbath was falling apart. Ozzy Osbourne had been fired due to his drug problems, and the band was desperate. They offered Dio the impossible job: replace the irreplaceable Ozzy Osbourne. Critics predicted disaster. Fans were furious. But Heaven and Hell, released in 1980, proved everyone wrong. It wasn't just successful. It was a masterpiece that revitalized Black Sabbath. Dio brought professionalism, sobriety, and a voice that could match Tony Iommi's legendary riffs. He wasn't replacing Ozzy. He was creating something entirely new. Here's what most fans don't know. It was during his Sabbath years that Dio popularized the devil horns gesture. He didn't invent it. His Italian grandmother taught it to him as the corna, used to ward off the evil eye. Dio brought it to metal stages, and suddenly every metalhead in the world was throwing horns. But creative differences with Tony Iommi were brewing. After Mob Rules in 1981, tensions exploded. The breaking point came during the mixing of Live Evil. Dio's vocals were deliberately buried in the mix. He knew it was time to leave. In 1982, at age 40, Dio made the boldest decision of his career. He left Black Sabbath to form his own band. Everyone thought he was crazy, leaving one of metal's biggest names to start over. But Ronnie knew his worth. The debut Dio album, Holy Diver, in 1983, became an instant classic. Rainbow in the Dark, Holy Diver, and Don't Talk to Strangers weren't just songs. They were anthems. At 41, when most rockers were considering retirement, Dio was hitting his creative peak. Throughout the 1980s, Dio ruled the metal world. Albums like The Last in Line and Sacred Heart proved he didn't need anyone else. He'd created his own kingdom, complete with medieval imagery and that unmistakable operatic voice. But the 1990s brought challenges. Grunge killed hair metal, and traditional metal became unfashionable. Dio's sales declined, and younger fans dismissed him as outdated. For a man who'd spent decades on top, the fall was devastating. The 2000s brought unexpected redemption. Metal was cool again, and a new generation discovered Dio. He reunited with Black Sabbath members to form Heaven and Hell, releasing The Devil You Know in 2009. His career was experiencing a renaissance. But Ronnie was hiding a terrible secret. During the Heaven and Hell tour, he'd been feeling weak and tired. His legendary voice was sometimes failing him on stage. Something was very wrong, but Dio, ever the professional, kept performing. Comment below. What's your favorite Dio song that shows why he was called the metal god? Because what happened next would test every ounce of his legendary strength. In late 2009, Dio was diagnosed with stomach cancer. For a man who'd spent his life projecting magical power and invincibility, The diagnosis was devastating. Cancer doesn't care about your legacy or your voice or your millions of fans. Dio approached his cancer battle like everything else, with determination and dignity. He underwent aggressive chemotherapy while trying to maintain his schedule. Fans watched in horror as their metal god visibly weakened, but Ronnie kept fighting, kept believing he could beat this final enemy. The treatments were brutal. Chemotherapy ravaged his body and affected his voice, the instrument he'd used to inspire millions worldwide. For a man whose identity was tied to his ability to sing, losing his voice was almost worse than facing death. In early 2010, it became clear the treatments weren't working. The cancer had spread, and Ronnie's condition was deteriorating rapidly. But even then, he was planning new music, talking about future tours. Refusing to accept his story might be ending. May 16, 2010, at 7:45 a.m., Ronnie James Dio lost his final battle. He died at Houston Methodist Hospital, surrounded by his wife Wendy and close friends. The man who'd sung about epic battles between good and evil had fought his own epic battle. And for once, evil had won. The metal world mourned like never before. Tributes poured in from every corner of music. Tony Iommi called him irreplaceable. Ozzy praised his professionalism. Fans gathered outside the hospital, throwing devil horns and playing his songs. But here's what made Dio's death different from other rock tragedies. There were no drugs, no alcohol, no self-destruction. This was a good man, a professional, a loving husband who'd lived with integrity. Cancer had taken someone the metal community genuinely respected. Dio's legacy is immeasurable. He proved heavy metal could be fantasy-based without being silly, powerful without being destructive. His voice inspired generations of singers. More importantly, he showed you could be a metal god while being a decent human being. Today, over a decade later, Dio's influence continues growing. The devil horns he popularized are thrown at metal shows worldwide every night. His songs are covered by countless bands. His name is mentioned with reverence reserved for metal's founding fathers. Ronnie James Dio didn't just sing about magic, he created it every time he stepped on stage. His death marked the end of metal's most noble era, when giants walked the earth and voices could move mountains. The metal god is gone, but his kingdom will stand forever. Long live the king. Long live Dio.